Hi, listeners. Hi, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the BytesBurn Podcast. And I'm your lovely host, Stacy, and with me is my wonderful co-host, Idris. And today we have a wonderful topic to discuss, something exciting, something, interesting and local to us here in Nigeria. Idris, would you like to tell our viewers what we have in store for them today?
Thank you, Stacy. Yes, today we have an interesting topic, which is around software development in Nigeria. Today we want to look at how has been the impact of software development on all the different industries and startups that we have in Nigeria, and the reality really of local softwares that we build in Nigeria. And as you know, there's a lot of software development talent that we have in Nigeria, and we've had a lot of talent, over many years now, and we still have more talents, diving into the field, learning and building for local companies. So we want to look at what the impact has been so far and how they've affected or transformed these industries and startups that we have in Nigeria.
Okay, excited to talk about that. Hear your perspective on that as well. Share that with our viewers. Okay, that's a very interesting topic. Like it's definitely something I'd love to hear a perspective on. One thing that I see is that software development is actually, solving local problems. But what are the local problems that it's currently solving, right? So what are the Nigerian problems that global software doesn't fix? So we have the economy here in Nigeria, we have the global economy. Our economy is quite different from what we have globally. Our payment infrastructures, our logistics, the kind of work we have, the kind of laws we have in place as well, quite different. Right. So it's like how are local developers building to solve problems for our own unique use case? So what kind of problems do you think that local developers have been able to successfully solve for our particular problem?
Yeah. So for me, I think if we look at it broadly, there are some industries that have been transformed in a way by local software development, and I think the easiest to point at would be e-commerce. We've had a lot of e-commerce startups that have helped people sell more online, and a few years ago, we didn't have a lot of options to sell online other than physical selling, but now selling online is like very common. It's the usual thing. People have options to sell and buy online, and while this is not entirely this hasn't entirely been dominated by local software, we've also had local players that are supporting businesses and retailers to be able to put their products up online. One of those that come to mind right now is Bumper, and we can see that they are a thriving startup and helping customers, businesses set up businesses online, without having to any technical expertise. Yeah, and we have a couple more industries like that, and also if you look at logistics, different aspects to different companies really that have come into the logistics space over the years with different kinds of solutions, and these are all powered behind this. And while those logistic companies may be more like operation intensive, but you could argue that they've had software as as their core has been supporting their operations, right? And most of those softwares are also built locally. And you have some other fields around, edutech. If you look at the U-Lesson Group and the likes. So I think we have many industries like that, but probably the most widely known one would be fintech, because it's just everywhere, and it's become almost like the de facto way to pay, receive payments and the likes. So those are some of the ones that come to mind for me right now.
Okay, interesting. So you had mentioned the e-commerce space. I think that one is particularly interesting to me because one thing I feel like those, like having software in that sector does, is the fact that it removes certain physical boundaries. Like I don't need to have a physical space to sell to people. Like people that are not in my physical space, I can sell to them. All right, it's people outside the country or just in a different location within the same country, I can sell to them. Removing that barrier, people can see my products, I can sell my products, create value in that sort of way. And then now meshing that with the other sector that you mentioned, which is logistics, right? So now I have products and I want to get them across to people not in the same physical locations. We have logistics that can help you do that. And like you also had mentioned, local developers are building things for, people like our local people, right? It's not just using foreign products or foreign software. We have things that work for our particular use case, and they're pretty good, right? So people might think, oh, because it's locally built, it's not, up to standard, but they're pretty good and they solve the problems quite nicely.
Yes, yes, I agree with that, and it's also that we don't have to heavily rely on the foreign alternatives for most of these things, because if we look at transportation, for example, you have the Ubers, the boats. Those are not local softwares. They are not locally built, but we've had in the past, before the general Okada ban in Lagos, on the highways and things like that.
So why that, to be honest?
Yeah, it was.
I thought for some reason they'd bring it back, because I just thought like we probably wouldn't be able to adapt to Okada. It's been here for a very long time. People are used to it, but somehow we adapted.
Somehow we adapted, and as at that time, you would argue that we have some local players as well, in that space, and they were building for that space as well. I think some of them had to like pivot into logistics when the ban thing happened. And yeah, it was most there were some locally built software and locally built solutions around those at that time. Again, they are probably more on the operations heavy side, but the core of the operation would be some local software that they use for orchestrating all their operations, right? So we had some of those, and I'm not sure if right now we have any local player that is dominant in the transportation section. I think we have some. There are some. There's this guys that do like bus, right? Like
Shuttlers.
There's Shuttlers, and there's one other one that used to be there. Something that has to do with Waka, something. I can't remember what the name is. I think maybe they rebranded, later on. But yeah, these local companies tend to have like their own, in-house built software to manage their operations, and it works. Yeah, it works, and this is something they also raise a lot of money on. So yeah, and aside these industries, I think fintech still is the biggest,
Yeah.
use case of any local software that we have, and
Yeah.
I think we would dive deeper into this because if you talk local software, you just cannot help but talk about fintech, right?
Yeah. The thing is that there are many alternatives, right? To be honest, I think there are a number of them. I think every Nigerian probably has, let's say, up to at least 3 fintech apps, and that's even being generous, right? Because there are so many alternatives. So if one is not working, it's just like you just have to distribute your funds across everywhere. When it comes to managing money or making money, like that's very crucial. So I think that that's why a lot of like why the fintech space is booming. Like when it comes to anything money, it's like everybody's using that. So it's not, oh, if I'm just in logistics or like, regardless of your profession, you need money, right? So I think that's one reason why the fintech, like software development in the fintech space is booming.
I have a non-fact backed theory in my head, and that is that every software developer in Nigeria at some point has had something to do with fintech. Either you've worked for fintech, or you've integrated a fintech app, fintech API, or you've had something to do with fintech, or you've implemented, some fintechy feature in your application. Because if you look at it, many apps that are not even fintech apps have a way for you to create some sort of wallet and system like that.
Yeah.
So in a sense, while that is, basically you may want to look at it as a minor feature compared to what fintech truly is. You've had, I think we have a very large talent pool in the fintech space in terms of software development, and it's an exciting thing. It's really interesting. I'm not sure why do you think fintech has been so dominant in terms of the local software that we build? Everybody just has to do fintech, even if you are building a startup. Many of the startups that people try to build always have something to do with fintech, or is tangential to fintech in some way.
Yeah. So I think that's because really us, our economy. So I'll talk about it in the sense of, would people want to pay for products or things that are not making them money or managing their money? So take, for example, the sectors we already talked about, like education now, right? If I feel like, oh, I can get resources from somewhere else, if I feel like there's an alternative or something I can handle manually, like maybe a bookkeeping app, I can always just try and use like I can use notes or do something on WhatsApp, or pen it down. Like that still works, right? It's just that there needs to be optimization in the sense of software, right? But when it comes to money management and things like that, people are willing to pay to be able to do that, right? And since payments, money is so fundamental to our everyday life, I feel like that's one thing that people would be willing to pay for, right? There's also the fact that the infrastructure as well, right? To build fintech or fintech apps, or apps that deal with receiving or paying out money, you don't necessarily need like physical infrastructure for that. Take for example logistics. You need to get a bag. There are factors like bad roads, things like that, traffic as well, that impact those sectors more than it would a fintech app.
They are operations heavy, those
Exactly.
industries. So someone on LinkedIn said something very interesting. He said, "Fintech in Nigeria is a national sport. It's like that's something everybody just knows how to play by default, or comes of age to play. Maybe when
Yeah.
you build software for a while and then you come of
Say
age, you just have to play the fintech game. But I think it's wonderful because it has allowed a lot of talents to really blossom, in Nigeria. And I'll show you an interesting map. So this map, was something I just came across on LinkedIn, and this is the map of the fintech, landscape in Nigeria. And you can see the sheer amount of fintech apps that we have in Nigeria operating
yeah.
locally, and it's just crazy. It's crazy.
Exactly what-
I mean, I use
Is it-
some of these,
yeah.
but there are some that I've not even heard of before now, and it's just crazy. Lots of different sectors, but fundamentally still fintech.
Yeah.
A lot. This is a lot, and it shows Nigeria as a dominant player, not in Africa when it comes to fintech, because I think for me, I think our NIBSS has been very crucial to this development as well. In the sense that the automated settlement scheme, behind the whole thing, and it's a big part of why all of this works. But I know it's not just something we have in Nigeria. Some other countries, I think I was checking out was it Brazil the other time. They also have, some sort of centralized payment scheme in the country, but theirs is a bit different. They have this system called PIX, where it's basically one app, like a super app for payments. Everything you want to pay for.
Everybody has to have that one app.
Yeah, everybody has that PIX app. Everything you want to pay for, anybody you want to pay, that app has everything. But I'm not sure if maybe there's like an API that other fintech startups in the country maybe connects to. But I saw that one was like an app that everybody uses. But in our case, what we have is API, and all these fintech organizations are able to connect and make transfers, pay different services, and this is the result.
But do you think that, like, obviously looking at this map, they say lots. Do you think that there would be more in the coming future, and then this market could possibly get saturated? And do you think that out of all these people, that a number of them are actually thriving? It's one thing to be in the market, but are you thriving in that market as well? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there will likely be more startups in this space, because there is always, I think in fintech there's always there's always an opportunity always an opportunity in Nigeria. So there'll likely be more startups that would come into this space and would try to solve problems in their own unique way. For example, one of the startups that we are building, SubSync, we try to solve the problem of subscriptions, and we inadvertently need to do some fintechy bit to ensure that people can pay conveniently and keep track of their payment in cases where they don't need to pay. So there will be solutions around different aspects of fintech. So yes, definitely we will see more startups enter the space. But as for thriving, I think a lot of them are doing, because there are different segments to it now. There's the guys that are focused on, just the banking, the digital banking. There are guys that are focused on, as you have it here, you have digital banking. There are personal assets management, wealth and asset management. There are the people that are involved in the loan and issuance of loan, and you see there's also the Web3 and all the other ones. So definitely there are different ones that are thriving in their different sectors, but yeah, I think we will have more. Some will drop off, naturally. But yeah, I think it's good that we have a lot of competition here. It's definitely something we can see that has benefited us over time. If you try with your normal bank and it doesn't work, you switch to maybe OPay to do a transfer. If OPay doesn't work, you try MoneyPoint. MoneyPoint doesn't work, you try the next best thing. So there are options.
In which I think all the traditional banking apps were down, and then people literally had to, like, there was a surge in people opening all this like mobile bank, all this like fintech apps like OPay, MoneyPoints, because those ones were going through at that time.
Yeah.
All right. So imagine there was no competition and it was just maybe one way, right, or one particular app, and then that one is down. That means everybody is stagnant. You can't move money from one place to another. You probably have to go back to maybe cash base.
I think competition also makes the guys that are thriving, sit up, and that means you get top-notch service all around.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to have. I know some people are like, we have too many fintech apps in Nigeria. Let's just chill and solve some other problem, which is
I'm one of them.
which is true if you look at it, because it's sort of like a market that has already had so many solutions. But if you look at it, competition is still good. Looking at it in that direction, and this is probably why do you think this is why we have less enterprise kind of softwares, like the Slacks, Teams, those kind of softwares that businesses actually use on a day-to-day?
Yeah, I would say that one reason for that is the fact that with fintech apps, like, you already know there's a market for it, right? But if you're building like an enterprise app, you need to do your customer research. How much are people willing to pay for this? Will people even be interested? Because I previously talked about the fact that paying for subscriptions isn't really a thing here. We feel like, okay, we have manual alternatives and things like that. We can just keep manually doing it, right? So in order to switch to like an enterprise app, you need to ensure that there's a market for it and people are willing to pay for that service.
I think people are willing to pay. If you look at, there was a period where the period when the dollar crisis started in Nigeria, where all the companies were bleeding cash because the things you used to pay for a certain amount in naira has gone up astronomically, and businesses were complaining about that the hike and all of that. And if you are a company that uses all this enterprise software, you would definitely at that point be open to local alternatives that work for you. And I think the market is there in a sense, but it is also, I think for me, it is also, will they be willing to trust locally made software to the point where they switch? I think they will if the quality is there, but in terms of the market, Yeah, well, of course, you still need to do your market research to ascertain that there's a market for if you are building a Slack alternative, for example. But I think if we look at it on the surface, we can say, yeah, there's some demand.
Mm. I think, like you also mentioned, the fact that if it's local, somehow like it will definitely be in a reduced cost, right? Because then, you know, they'd be running their expenses in naira when they're charging you. It will be relatively cheaper than the global alternative, which will most likely be charging you in dollars, right? I think there was even a point where people were looking for Nigerian cloud-based alternatives, right? But then the thing is, are these people reliable? Like you mentioned, the trust. Like, can they trust an application that is local, that was built by local developers as opposed to one on a global scale, right? Because it's one thing to use it, but if it doesn't meet the standards or it's not reliable, maybe you open the app, it's always crashing, that kind of vibe. So yeah, I definitely agree with that as well.
Yeah. Dear viewers, do let us know what you think. Do you think there is too many fintech apps in Nigeria already, and we should focus on more on enterprise apps? Leave us your comments in the comment section, and watch out for our next episodes. So these are episode 2. Do let us know what you think, your feedback, and your support is quite important to us. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe and share our videos if you like what we do. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.